a lot of this manosphere stuff, it operates on the grift, right? It's basically this giant self-help grift for lonely, alienated dudes. That's like, I'm going to teach you to be alpha. And this is what it's kind of coalesced to with like Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, Trump, Musk, all of these kind of, that's what they're selling. Whereas I think the rationalist discourse is more like the internal dialogue and discourse among the people who are selling the grifts. Like the incels are the customers and the rationalists are the salesmen.
Milan ou Tripoli, Vilnius ou Benghazi, Paris, Moscou, on fait le bunga, bunga, Bangkok ou Bogota, Le Caire ou Jakarta, Gustavia, on fait le bunga, bunga.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to BungaCast, the global politics podcast at the end of history. I'm Alex Oculey in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and also here is George Hoare in London.
Hello.
And
how do you do?
I do. How do I do it? I don't know, but that I do. And I am happy to welcome back Alex Gendler, one of my favorite Homo sapiens. We're going to talk a lot about this in just a second. Hi, Alex. How's it going?
Thanks. Great to be here, as always.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking in first place about your essay that came out in The Point a few months back called Homo Algorithmicus. So we're going to be talking about types of guy, or specifically types of man, or maybe if that's too sexist, types of human being. So we need to know what kind of homo you are. Are you a solo homo, which we're going to get onto towards the end of this? Are you a techno homo, which we're going to deal with in just a second? Or can we all become homo, a truly human being? Can we
or post-Homo?
Well, whoa, okay,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, because we were just talking off air whether the post prefix is being superseded by techno. You have techno populism, techno feudalism, techno polarity, which is all coming in the place of things like postmodernism, post structuralism, post industrialism, I don't know. There's loads of posts out there, and we're seeing where we can move beyond that. Anyway, as a way into this topic, we should start with one specific Homo sapiens, Luigi Mangione, who you use as a hook in your article to exemplify a sort of, or you argue that he exemplifies a certain rationalist worldview. And you take issue with that. In what terms do you take issue with that rationalist worldview?
Yeah, and I mean, just to give a bit of background, I was looking into the sort of characterization of Luigi that emerges from like when they dug up all his extensive social media presence and all his posts, rather than the thing that actually made him famous, which is what he did in December. But so what was interesting to me was that this guy wasn't, what people initially expected, some kind of left-wing radical who was going to make a statement about the predatory insurance industry. He was actually what I argue is a very distinct type of guy that has emerged in the last few years, which is this online rationalist subculture that's, how to put it, it's sort of like the default subculture ideology of people who work in tech and who are very active on Twitter and other platforms. People who consider themselves very unideologically rational and able to sort of rationalize themselves through any complex, social, political, historical, economic, whatever question. That everything can be reached just through this kind of like strict application of the deductive process, and which and
solutions oriented. They're solutions oriented guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to put it. This online rationalist subculture, default worldview or Weltanschauung, I think might be the German word of tech. And that idea of being, unideologically rational. I think, listeners might know people who more or less fit this bill. I certainly am thinking of a couple of people that I know. And if this is the kind of, I guess, the kind of starting point or the starter pack, I don't know, the kind of like the general way in, then what's the kind of the peak of this, or what's this word TESCREAL, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that's been thrown around? What's the kind of the more like work through or kind of philosophically sophisticated version in this TESCREAL melange or stew, ideological stew?
So yeah, TESCREAL this is an acronym coined by these two researchers, Gebru and Torres, one of whom was like sort of in that world before he left it. But yeah, it stands for transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. Two of which I kind of focus on in this article, which are the last two, effective altruism and long-termism. But they all kind of coalesce together, and each one kind of supports the others. And people might be familiar with effective altruism specifically because Sam Bankman-Fried was, that he was a big financier of kind of the effective altruist movement. And which is like, the thing is, like, on its face, a lot of these things sound kind of reasonable, right? Effective altruism was this idea that interventions like charity and stuff like that should be measured by their impact and should be like very rigorously measured, and where resources should be directed should follow kind of this measurement of impact. Yeah.
Which sounds like fairly, like, some of that stuff it's like in TESCREAL is pretty out there. It's even hard to pronounce, like extropianism, singular. I'm not going to, so I don't even know how to pronounce it. And then other stuff is like effective altruism sounds opaque, but then when you hear about it, you're like, well, that's sounds, it's not quite common sense. It sounds like something that you encounter quite a lot. It's like corporate impact measurement and stuff.
But I think that one of the important points, or what your essay got me thinking, is that, like, I guess the kind of online rationalist is led ever further, ever more towards the kind of the full TESCREAL bingo set, because the more that you kind of accept, well, okay, anything that you do for other people should be kind of maximally effective. Well, then you kind of bring in, well, wouldn't it be good if we could be transhuman? Long-termism, why have an arbitrary kind of lifetime kind of horizon for assessing whether something's good or not? This idea that if more of a good thing is better, as I think William McCaskill puts it, then, you kind of have all of these things, which it's kind of a funnel that leads people to this, to what I think is actually quite an extreme position. But it seems, that's what happens if you have a little reason is good, then this is the kind of the full whack version.
Right. And these are the kinds of people who have a tendency to want to follow things to their logical conclusion, or logical, quote unquote, as in the sense that they've understood it. And this is kind of my other sort of bugbear with this. A lot of them are people who are like very, very allergic to the humanities. And I think that's actually one sort of through line that characterizes this whole sort of culture, because the whole thing is they almost pride themselves on avoiding humanities discourse, because they see themselves as so untainted and unideological that they're able to just apply pure logic to any question, where the humanities, you might get some ideology in there, and we don't want that.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think it's all nicely sketched out in the essay. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but I think or I guess maybe to kind of put it in some of the political context, because, listeners might be thinking like, yeah, there's going to be some weird tech bros and they're going to have some like weird ideas. And this is one, particular strand of that. And yeah, they sit in front of laptops coding all day or doing whatever. And so, their conditions of work and maybe allow them to kind of, get rid of all of the humanities, all of the things which aren't, easily quantifiable and optimizable and stuff like that. But yeah, and so in terms, I guess, then of the political split within tech, do you think, because you kind of in the essay you sort of situate it that there can appear to be this split between liberal effective altruists on the one side and these kind of neo-reactionary libertarians on the other, is this a real split, or is it just kind of a illusionary split, and really they are all rationalists moving towards this kind of increasingly TESCREAL position, even if they appear to be, on the face of things, maybe opposed?
Yeah, well, I argue that it seemed until recently that there was this split, and what we've seen kind of in the recent, I guess, in the past year, really, but I think it starts kind of before that. With the Trump election, it really becomes clear that actually, no, these are all the same people. Anecdotally, the germ of this idea for this article was really like even before the election, like maybe a year or two before. I knew some of the people involved in both of like the kind of dime square neo-reactionary scene, which is also very heavily tech funded.
Mm-hmm.
And also some people in the kind of effective altruist community. And I've been to like parties, both. And I realized I was kind of seeing the same faces at some of these, at both. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. What's like the overlap? And then the more you kind of like talk to these people, it's like, oh yeah, they all sort of have this utilitarian view of the world and of humanity. Right. And they think that, it can be these like technical, and in fact it's really interesting the way that like technocracy kind of just is in the background of all of this, and the idea that humanity can be kind of like optimized, managed, molded, for some kind of utilitarian purpose. I think that's really what's in the background here. So yeah, and I think you mentioned Alex, you mentioned the recent like Evgeny Morozov piece. And he actually highlights this in there that for a while there was perceived to be this gap between sort of liberal-leaning tech employees and their right-leaning bosses, right? So I think to the extent that this like split existed, that it might have been there, but as we know now, the bosses ultimately have the final say, right?
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, I think it is. So this piece, which Alex just referred to, is a piece called "The New Legislators of Silicon Valley," and it actually works as kind of neat companion piece to yours, Alex, because he does spell out that, or he holds out the possibility, I guess, that there can be tech PMCs, or effectively salaried employees in tech firms, who might be able to perform an oppositional role with regard to the tech oligarchs who have some of these kind of crazier reactionary ideas. And I'm skeptical about that, and listeners might want to refer back to the episode we did last, which has just come out last week as you're hearing this, on the PMC and kind of what next for kind of PMC, the critique of the PMC under this kind of under in MAGA world or whatever that we now live in or whatever. And I guess there's, as you indicate already, Alex, it seems like that possibility, if it ever existed, is no longer really there. I mean, the challenge mounted by salaried tech employees to the tech oligarchs was in terms mainly, I guess, of woke, rather than a genuinely humanist, in a genuinely humanist guise challenge that kind of very narrow rationalist worldview. It was just like narrow rationalist worldview, but with a bit more inclusivity.
Yeah, and even that kind of folds in on self. Like the example I use in my essay was, so like effective altruism. Supposedly, it's the left wing of like this techno whatever, and they're very concerned with like poverty and climate change and helping people, right? But then when you combine it with the other pieces of the TESCREAL, so here's a funny thing. One of this guy, what was his name, Nick something. Anyway, one of these thought leaders in the effective altruist movement wrote in one of these thought experiments. They love thought experiments. And he's like, well, we want to help the biggest amount of people, right? And the population keeps growing. And, so we want to make sure our interventions are also maximizing our ability to help people in the future. The thing that helps people, the thing that really saves lives is technology and technological progress. So with all that in mind, it's like, it's couched in all these, like, it does not seem unreasonable to me to say that saving the lives of people in the first world is more important than saving the lives of people in the developing world, because the average person in the first world is more likely to contribute to technological progress that will save more lives in the long run. So it's funny because it's almost like this woke way of reaching the same conclusion as like Nazi eugenicism, basically.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's eugenicism with extra steps. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
It does sort of seem you have these two kind of pseudo opposed like wings, which they take different routes but get to the same final. I was going to say final position.
Solution?
No, final answer.
Right.
Anyhow, I did want to ask Alex about. Sorry, I should clarify, Alex G, about the title of the piece. So, because Alex did set, sorry, to clarify again, Alex H did set this up. What kind of guys are we? Homo podcastus or whatever else. Is this a type of guy? Maybe not. Anyway, so what is a Homo algorithmicus? Are we like? Is this something that we can be, or is this something which we are all already? What is this kind of? What does it mean? And can you just like clarify this quickly for listeners?
Yeah, I mean, it's a riff on. Well, this is all. I think the original phrase is Homo economicus, right? Which is the sort of ideal average person imagined by like bourgeois economists in like the 19th century, where everyone just follows their rational self-interest and responds to price signals and whatever. And then the riff on that was Homo Sovieticus, responding the kind of describing the new Soviet man. Which the new Soviet man was supposed to be the ideal worker, and Homo Sovieticus is kind of like an ironic take on describing like the kind of worker that actually emerged under the actual existing conditions of the Soviet Union, which was kind of far from ideal. It was like generally kind of like this stereotype was kind of lazy, drunk, sort of knows exactly how to like pretend he's doing work, and the old joke like we pretend to work and the managers pretend to pay us. So that and so what is Homo algorithmicus? I think there's it was kind of an off the cuff phrase I coined, but I think there's something to it because it also carries that dual character in that the technocrats. It's something on the one hand that the technocrats are trying to create that they assume all people are. All of us are like consumers who are just responding to the algorithm, following the algorithm. But it's also these people who have actively taken steps to mold their lives in this way, where everything is an optimization algorithm. It's like from your career to your like whatever charitable giving you do to your diet. There's lots of these people. Again, people like money and like that type of guy, opposed to about I don't know, your optimal, the optimal time to eat because of your circadian rhythm and fat absorption and all of this like pseudoscientific stuff. How you raise your kids, also an algorithm. There's that Guardian profile I reference of the quote unquote like natalist couple who wants to maximize, who's trying to have as many children as possible, pass on their high IQs, and they raise them in this weird kind of fascist Taylorist management kind of way. So, and all their kids are named like Optimus Augustus or whatever.
Cool names.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like that. That to me is Homo algorithmicus, who like people who basically completely like live their lives by an optimization algorithm.
Yeah, no, I think that's really nicely put. Sorry, go on, Alex.
Well, no, I mean, when I read the essay and hearing you talk about it, especially, kind of joined together some things in my head, because I mean, you have humanism as a concept, and it's actually like the kind of commitment to humanity as a concept, not to kind of empirical human beings necessarily, right? Humanitarianism, which kind of really has its apogee in like the 1990s, is concerned with empirical human beings, not with any concepts, right? It's like, let's leave behind old ideologies. We just need to help people directly. And so charity comes to have this very important role in international affairs, in the kind of large structures and organizations, in domestic politics as well, particularly as the state is no longer seen as the actor responsible for welfare, etc. Right? And so you get this concern. And so, like, I guess if we're charting this against humanism, or like the humanism line is going down as we move forward in time from the 1970s through to today. You have humanitarianism, which itself is a kind of corruption of humanism. And the algorithmic application of a type of humanitarianism, like your example of mosquito nets, like let's just give a bunch of mosquito nets because that'll help poor Africans deal with malaria. But wait, what if we just made ourselves richer? That would be even more optimal because we can create even more malaria nets, except the malaria nets never happen. And you're just focused on this kind of recursive justification for making yourself richer. And that itself seems to be a kind of deepening the decline of humanism away from what we understand it through to humanitarianism, through to this kind of post-humanitarian, hyper-rationalized. I mean, now I'm kind of imagining charts in my head, which are always great for podcasting because it's, you know, very easy to convey, of course, these lines going across. But you have this kind of rationalization and humanism, which are pointing in opposite directions. And maybe they crossed over at some optimal point in the past, but now they have strongly diverged.
Right. Yeah, well, what was the optimal point? Like the early 90s, I guess, the end of history era?
Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe
Yeah.
there was, or maybe just rationalization insofar as the kind of development of the forces of production had reached a level, but there was still a humanistic spirit in society such that they could be wielded for, or, you know, that could be like the two hitched together, that you have kind
Right.
of humanism and technique welded together to further humanity. And now we're on the other side of that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I might disagree with you a little bit, or just to be a bit sympathetic to the Homo Algorithmicus, i.e. the kind of TESCREAL people who have internalized that algorithm, that optimization, I think they would say there is a humanism of a certain sort in what they're trying to do. I mean, that's what kind of utilitarians have always argued, that actually the way that you respect the moral value of persons is by being completely indifferent as to which people get the best outcomes, or something along those lines. I mean, but it is, but it is a very strange sort of humanism that is has to have that kind of indifference. And maybe we are now in the technological conditions where utilitarianism can be, you know, obviously this is something which I better get this right, having studied this and even taught it, but you know, 19th century British social philosophers like John Stuart Mill, you know, they're coming, and Bentham, obviously, they're coming up with all of these ideas. But now we actually have the technology to have a truly human, like specific human indifferent humanism. So maybe this is going to be a growing ideology because it actually fits better to the sort of technical tools of distribution and identification of problems and solving of them. I don't know if I can even convince myself.
No, I think I think there's something to that like the rise of, like, you know, algorithmic, like, society, basically, right? Kind of, it's in a way, one of the first times that, like, a lot of these utilitarian ideas from the 19th century about, like, you know, utility functions and maximizing utility. It's kind of the first time that these can be applied across society on a fine grained scale in, like, many aspects of our lives, right? And it's kind of, it would be really funny to, like, you know, bring back Bentham or whoever from the dead and kind of be like, no, that's not what I meant. Or maybe they'd be really happy with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Bentham would be happy. I'm not sure if Mill would, but
right.
Bentham's still pickled in UCL, so maybe some scientists will find a way to, I don't know, to re-engine. It's like Jurassic Park, but instead it's Jeremy Bentham Park. They get that
turned
DNA.
himself into a pickle.
Oh my God.
He is in a bit of a pickle. Yeah. Anyhow, sorry, I feel like I'm letting this get off the rails a little bit. So I guess we've kind of sketched out this kind of, I guess, some of the seedbed, and then some of that kind of online rationalist subculture, and then some of the kind of more sophisticated or more elaborated kind of sets of ideas around what are the typical kind of political concerns, like practical, like topics that these tend to get applied to. You know, what is kind of getting these kind of TESCREAL guys kind of hot under the political collar, so to speak.
Well, first of all, like AI, right off the bat, they are obsessed with AI. It's just like at this point, it's pretty much all they talk about, and it's both the people who are very pro AI and supposedly anti AI. Like whether it's either that basically both believe that not just AI as we know it, but like what they actually mean by artificial general intelligence, like actually AI that's as smart as humans or and smarter, capable of learning and making itself even smarter. Basically, the singularity. They generally there is a shared belief that this is both possible. It's right around the corner, and it's going to revolutionize everything. And just where they diverge is whether this is good or bad. And so, a lot of times the more kind of like accelerationists and even some of the reactionaries are basically good. Like, let's like bring on the singularity. AI will replace all the kind of weak parts of human democratic deliberation and all that stuff. Whereas a lot of times the effective altruists and some of the other are they're worried about, oh, what if the AI is evil and what if it kills everyone? So we should actually devote more resources to trying to alignment, the alignment problem, what they call it, try to make sure that AI has the right values and that it's good and that it works to help everyone. And either way, the answer is pour more resources into AI research. Again, right?
Who saw that coming? So, also something else to touch on in the essay, and take this from Luigi Mangione, is about birth rates. Is this a kind of another typical
Right.
thing that they like to? Because I mean, you've got to have more people being born to have to have homos of any sort, algorithmicus, sapiens, or whatever. It is a numbers game in that sense. Do they have some solutions to birth rate problems up their sleeves?
Yeah, and in fact, Luigi himself had some was very concerned about the declining birth rate in Japan, for instance, and I think one of the solutions he proposed was banning hentai. So
So, freedom of speech advocates would not allow this, I don't
right,
think.
yeah, much of the Western online world would bristle at this, I assume.
The
But
weebs.
yeah, so it's a lot of these. I mean, and this is a debate that goes beyond the TESCREAL world because one of the things like I noticed like the natalism discourse has been popping up everywhere. Like even on the left, it's like we need to restore the family, and also who's going to support the social safety nets if the population is declining. And
My sorry, just to jump in, my
yeah,
read on this is that there is a difference between some of the more kind of, I guess, pro-social left voices who are concerned with like families and what's good, what's best for bringing up children. But it seems like the more kind of TESCREAL or these kind of new Californian ideology tech types, they're not really concerned with families. They want birth rates. And if families are the best way to get birth rates, then that's good. But in terms of the kind of the jury's out, I think, on the family, I would maybe suggest from their point of view because it's not fully been established through RCTs, randomized controlled trials, that families are better than just letting kids grow up in the wild without any parenting. And that
Or
is,
just in a bubble, incubator babies who then just
yeah.
yeah.
remain in the
And
bubble
we're
Well,
until
probably never get ethical approval to do those trials. Damn government, clipping the
right.
wings of these
Well,
researchers.
Musk is doing it himself, right? Um, No, I mean that's exactly. He'll say openly that he's doing his part to address the birth rate crisis by, I guess, DMing Instagram models to see if they want to IVF his babies. I don't know. He probably has like, apparently he has like 9 of them now or something, maybe more that we don't know about. But yeah, you're right. And at the same, I think what it is it's not. They see family as just another instrumental utilitarian thing. So maybe it's like promoting family for the plebs. That's how the plebs can contribute to raising the birth rate. But for those who have the resources, you don't need family. You can just spread your seed scientifically and grow the babies in vats. Both are fine, right? As long as line go up.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
also a bit of a contradiction, because from the perspective of capital, there's always too few or too many human beings. There's always too few or too many citizens, too few or too many workers. You have too few, the wages go up. You have a tighter labor market, that's not good. But if you have too many of them, you have too many disposable humans, which are a bit of a problem that has to be managed, which is a bit of foreshadowing to what we're going to come on to talk about in a bit, I guess, as well. But remaining, I guess, with tech, it is interesting that they have such a concern with falling birth rates when they themselves are such advocates of AI and automation and the idea that we won't need human labor for much anymore. So it's like, it's a bizarre concern. And then of course you have the racialized concern, or that's one iteration of it, which is, well, we need more white people and fewer brown and black people because there's way too many of them. And so then it becomes like a kind of fairly straightforward or traditional kind of racist concern with the wrong type of people. But it's interesting that the kind of tech thought is concerned with birth rates when they seem to be, I think it would be more consistent for them to be like, well, actually, it's good that there's fewer humans because it means that our techno world, which we want to bring into, we want to give birth to, will be a little bit more seamless. There'll be one less problem to manage.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, what I argue is that, and again, I've had this kind of objection from people I know who are more closely in the tech world, that like, oh, you kind of portray this as a homogenous thing, where no, actually, like, no, I'm describing a kind of like scene within which there are very vocal debates on all of these topics, right? What TESCREAL kind of describes, I think, the value of the acronym is like that all these debates are happening on the same terms with the same assumptions.
Nice.
And so, for example, there are debates on, oh, should we promote the family, or should we try to raise the population by any means possible? And then some of them are like, no, it's good if people just get replaced by AI. We can have trillions of virtual minds in a simulated universe. What they have in common is the obsession with quantity as a good in itself. Right. So whether it's more naturally born humans, from families, or no, we can just replace everyone with even more, even greater quantities of, like simulated virtual AI minds existing in like the Matrix or whatever. And just there's an unspoken nobody, like there's basically no objection to like, okay, but like why is instantiating more people consciousnesses, whatever, why is that a good in itself?
Hello friends, you've reached the end of a sample from an episode only available to subscribers. We put out 2 episodes a month for free. For access to the rest in its entirety, please join us at patreon.com/bungacast. For $7 a month, subscribers receive original, exclusive episodes with the entirety of the BungaCast cast. That's George Hoare, myself, Alex Hochuli, and our contributing editors, Philip Cunliffe, Amber Lee Frost, Catherine Liu, Lee Jones, Alex Gurevich, and Lee Phillips. We've got extended interviews with guests, episodes on current affairs, and original episodes on theory, history, and culture, so as to understand the crises of our times. We also have the BungaCast Reading Club, where Phil, George, and myself present the key books and essays necessary for understanding the world today, how we got here, and where we might be going. Subscribers also get a digital subscription to Damage Magazine, with whom we're partnered, and you can find all this info at patreon.com/bungacast. We do hope you'll join us. These are turbulent times, and ideologically confused ones as well. What we try to do is find political clarity, to move beyond the decadent age of Bunga Bunga.
De A ou pas se taire.